our vision for like the long term of Somnia is it almost becomes like a decentralized version of Roblox. Have you ever seen Roblox in Web 2, which is like this? There's lots of experiences. You can bring your avatar everywhere. You can play games. You can go to music concerts. There's loads of things you can do in Roblox. I think Somnia will end up something similar to that in its end format, which would be interesting to see.
Hey, Jim, Paul, and thanks a bunch for being on this podcast and selecting us as our main Genesis validators and putting the faith into BlockHunters. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a wonderful day. I'm pretty excited about this interview. Somnia is just at the beginning right now, and we want to be here and document everything about it.
Yep. So, yeah, we just launched mainnet, so we're just getting started.
Exactly. Now the fun actually starts.
Yeah, exactly.
I usually like to start from the beginning, Paul, and I want to know who were before crypto and what pulled you into this rabbit hole.
Oh, you want my life story, right?
Yeah, your life story, exactly. I'm always curious about these kind of journeys because for everybody it's kind of different. There are some people that are born into crypto and some people that actually had like previous lives before crypto.
Yeah, so I was a computer scientist at university a long time ago now. Started off my career in TradFi, so I worked at Goldman Sachs. I was there for 3 years for my sins. I did that for money, I'll be honest with you, but I was always into finance. It's kind of a hobby for mine. Then I joined a very early stage startup called Improbable. So I joined there when there was 4 of us, like 13, 14 years ago now. We scaled from 4 of us when I started to about 1,200 when I left, raised several $100 million at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, and over $100 million ARR. So we primarily sold technology and services to the games industry and also the sports and music industry. So my journey there was very varied. I pretty much did all of the jobs, ranging from an engineer in the core technology, the first support guy, a sales guy, head of product marketing, head of commercial. So I did loads of different jobs there. So I really saw the gamut of being in a startup and scaling a technology company. Web3 wise, I got into the space back in 16, 17. So when Ethereum first came about. Yeah, it's a long story. So I never got Bitcoin. Like I now own a lot of Bitcoin, but it took me a while to really understand Bitcoin because I don't really understand Veblen goods. I didn't really understand this was a new form of digital gold. I saw it as a payments network and I was like, it's not very good as a payments network. It's quite slow. Then they've also had Lightning and things like that, but I kind of get it a lot more nowadays. There's like a store of value and that's actually incredibly valuable for the world. But when Ethereum came around, I like fell in love very quickly. This kind of global distributed world computer with a ledger. I was like, this is incredible. Because first of all, I started thinking about it for financial applications. So I came from finance and I was like, wow, this stops all intermediaries. This means that we can unbank loads of people, bank the unbanked. And I was like, this is going to be really cool for the whole world. But then I started to go think about it more. And I was like, this idea of this globally distributed world computer can be good for any digital asset. And in fact, in its final form, I was like, this world computer, which anyone can plug data and logic into, I was like, this could actually just be an incredibly interesting primitive for everyone globally to plug into in different forms of fashion. So I was like, okay, I gotta go into this a bit more. So internally at Improbable, I pitched very hard to get a few of our initial video games onto the blockchain because I was like, this is going to be the future of digital assets. Everything's going to become NFT wasn't even a word yet, by the way, but everything's going to become a digital asset and blockchain is going to back that. They thought I was mad. They looked at me like I was a crazy person. Eventually, I got a R&D team to do like a proof of concept with a few of our games. That proof of concept completely failed. Basically, Ethereum was just way too early back then. The tool chain wasn't very good. The technology wasn't great at that point. So it just wasn't really ready for doing anything at scale yet. So I was like, cool, nice idea. Let's put that in a corner for now and maybe come back to it in a few years when the technology matures. So fast forward to 2020, the business now, we've started going into kind of real world activations. We did like these big activations with people like Major League Baseball, where we do digital baseball matches, people like Universal Music, where we do digital music events and with like K-pop stars. And all of these were going to monetize through digital assets, basically either access controls or some kind of wearables for your avatar. And I was like, okay, blockchain really needs to be part of this story, because ultimately you had all these different brands that owned their experiences, and we had this vision of them all being interoperable. So a consumer would go to one event, buy some digital items, and use it across all of the events. And I was like, blockchain is the best solution for this here, because you have this trustless counterparty that everyone can plug into. So once again, I start looking at all of the blockchains in the ecosystem at that point in time. This time, the technology has come forward a bit, but we still had an issue with kind of scaling and scalability. The problem was these events, you'd get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of consumers show up at the same time. And they all wanted to interact on chain, like buy something pretty much at the same time. And so blockchains at that point in time weren't really designed for that mass consumer scale. They were good for slower moving finance when you had like DeFi summer and that stuff like that, but they weren't really good for like when loads of people want to do the same thing at the same time.
So you could say this was the spark that made you build Somnia, that you saw that Ethereum was good, is now really good for institutions, but is not really good for gaming, which you need a lot of TPS and a lot of speed so the gaming could work properly.
Yeah, exactly. It goes beyond gaming. For me, it's any application that is going to scale to a mass consumer audience. So that could be gaming, that could be something in the music industry, the sports industry. SocialFi is also interesting as an avenue. Prediction markets are also another interesting avenue, where basically if you have an app where you're going to have 1 million plus users using it concurrently, blockchains aren't really designed for that. They're not good for that. They're good for kind of institutional, slow moving finance. But when you get into these mass consumer applications, you need a hell of a lot more throughput. You also need a very low latency experience so that when people click a button, it resolves instantly. And you also need to make it so that it is super duper cheap, because if you're spending multiple dollars per transaction and you have these mass consumer applications, you tend to have items that cost $1.69, maybe even less. If you're spending multiple dollars on that transaction, it just doesn't make financial sense at the end of the day.
Yeah, what happened with NFTs in 2021 on Ethereum?
Yeah, I think, again, that was, for me, like, you could just see it was very early as a space. Like, it totally made sense to have these ideas of digital collectibles. And I think with NFTs, using them for like high-end art, where the art is worth like tens of thousands of dollars, that still makes sense to me. But when you're looking at millions of people all buying the same t-shirt or same pair of sneakers or whatever the digital asset is, it just doesn't, it's not really designed to do that. And that's why we built Somnia at the end of the day, to solve this problem of what happens when you have millions of consumers showing up trying to interact on chain at the same time.
How do you feel it was the journey from testnet, and how did it shape the project's culture and community?
Oh, very interesting question. So we started the project, so very early on, even during the DevNet phase, we opened up the technology to the community. It's very different to a lot of other chains. Most chains, you don't make it public until the testnet happens. So even our DevNet was a public DevNet where you got end users using it. But I think that there was a step change at testnet. If you look at our community growth, it was strong and steady. And then the testnet launched and it kind of went parabolic. And also the adoption from end user applications also went up very quickly as well. I think this is because the space in general, when you get to a testnet phase, they know you're a project that's probably going to be around for a period of time. It probably will get to mainnet. And so the kind of respect level increases, and thus the community increases a lot. So I'd say the community changed from what I'd consider primarily like farmers. We had a core community that was very devout and believed in the mission, but there was a lot of farmers, to then it grew out to having this bigger core of people that really believed in the future of Somnia. And you also saw people start to, because the applications started coming online during testnet, we had a lot of games, you had these kind of ecosystem applications. The community started to shape around those and become much more appropriate for how we were going to market, rather than before it was a very general community, is the way I'd put it. So yeah, for me, the community kind of skyrocketed. So we had to kind of manage the culture of the community at that point, but also the type of community members also became much more kind of like empowered and enjoyed the project a lot more, I'd say, during the testnet phase. It was very, very cool to see. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't escape the farmers. They're always gonna be around, and if they are not happy, they're just gonna fudge your project. But I'm very happy to hear that you actually had community members that are valuable to the project and they stuck around.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that now in the numbers, right? Like today, there's already like 200 or so thousand accounts still actively using the Somnia mainnet from pretty much day one. And so you can see that there was a kind of core user base that was like actually staying around and actually enjoyed the applications. And that is going to continue to grow now. You can't discount the farmers though. I think a lot of projects, like they play a role still in terms of battle testing the technology, generating transactions to make sure it's all working. And so I don't think you should discount the farmers, but at the end of the day, you need to find who is your kind of core community and invest in them as much as possible. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's the game right now, so we are playing the game as the best way we can. But at a more technical level, Somnia achieved over 1 million TPS in sub-second finality. What technical innovations made this possible?
So Somnia is basically a complete front to back rewrite of a blockchain. There is no off-the-shelf technology or forks of existing technologies in Somnia at all. And we had to do this to get the performance characteristics we're talking about. So going from the top to the bottom of the stack, at the execution level, we basically take EVM bytecode and then compile that down to machine code using a custom EVM compiler. That gives you much higher execution throughput because obviously machine code is much better than interpreted bytecode. And that was a custom compiler to do that. There's some cool tricks as well that we do in order to make that even more efficient. So that's at the execution level. Then the database. The database is a new database written from scratch called IceDB. We tried really hard to use off-the-shelf tech there. So we looked at Pebbles, looked at Rocks, I looked at all the kind of general blockchain databases that people use, but nothing was fast enough. They all have assumptions about underlying data structures that aren't really taking into account how blockchains are structured. They also have very weird read and write cache structures, which are not very optimized for blockchain data. And then the other thing we added was what we call predictable performance. So the ability for every time a read or write happens on IceDB, you can work out how much gas that read or write is going to cost ahead of time, and therefore you can price transactions more effectively, fit more gas in a block, and therefore increase the throughput of the system. So that basically, and also Ice is really fast. Like it has an average read or write time of 15 to 100 nanoseconds. Most of the time you measure database is in microseconds, so it's really fast in terms of its read or write strategy. So that was a whole new database written from scratch, really thinking about blockchains from the ground up. Then you have the consensus model. So the consensus model is a new custom consensus algorithm called multi-stream consensus. It's inspired by a white paper called Autobahn BFT. You can kind of look it up. This one's a bit hard to explain without a diagram, but I'll try and talk it through. So the way it works is each validator is running its own kind of mini blockchain, which we call a data chain. So basically it can progress those data chains at whatever rate the validator can create blocks. And then consistently across all of them, there is what we call a global consensus chain. So basically that's taking a snapshot across all of the validators and being like, what is the head state of the blockchain? So that's continually happening. So you can work out, actually, this is the real head state of the blockchain. That is then replayed down back to all the validators, and they reorder their data chains if there's any collisions or anything like that. So that basically allows you to kind of create data at a high rate, and then you get that global consensus continually taking snapshots, which means you get much, much higher throughput and much, much lower latency. The trade-off and the problem with that approach is you have to stream a lot of data between all the nodes in the network, because you're constantly streaming all of those blocks across all of the network continually. So you have a lot of data to move around the network. And the way we fix that is at the final level. So we wrote a custom networking algorithm, which is really thinking about how you compress blockchain data down really effectively so that all the validator nodes can send that across the network very efficiently and effectively. We took learnings we had from the games industry where we'd done these kind of massively multiplayer experiences before, and we kind of took learnings from that. So it has a lot of different techniques in there. One, it uses the distribution of how blockchain data is distributed. So there's a power law basically where certain accounts and certain contracts are called over and over again. You can take that information and compress that down to make that data smaller using information theory. That's why the testnet was called Shannon. There's then other things like streaming compression, which is used in the video industry. We can do that because that streaming block system that I talked about before. And so essentially what you do is kind of use all those techniques to really compress blockchain data down to like 10 to 20 times more than any other chain in the market, which allows you to shuttle that data around the chain at the end of the day. So all of those, I think actually, if I was going to pick one, that networking thing is probably the most innovative, but we don't talk about that in the space. We always talk about consensus algorithms, but I think that's the most interesting part. So yeah, TLDR, front to right rewrite with blockchain, that's how we do it.
Yeah, it's very interesting because that's the beauty when actual founders from the Web 2 come into Web 3 and have business experience, life experience. That's how we innovate blockchains. But I'm curious, why did you choose this model instead of parallel execution? Because every new chain right now goes into that direction. Why make it custom? Is it because of the whole gaming industry that you activated?
Yes. So parallel approaches look good in benchmarks, but they don't scale as well as people think. So the problem is when you have collisions in parallel approaches, they don't work. So let me explain what a collision is. So say we were all trying to mint the same NFT at the same time. Everyone's clicking mint, mint, mint. Parallel can't scale that out because you're all hitting the same smart contract and you're trying to increment the same counter and everyone's trying to mint the same thing at the same time. You can't scale that effectively with parallel approaches. Similarly to if we were trading on a DEX and we're all trading on the same LP pool, everyone is hammering the same piece of on-chain state, same piece of smart contract, and parallel approaches can't scale that out effectively. And so we really kind of looked at that, and that's the kind of use cases we're looking at. When you look at mass consumer applications, what is happening is users are all doing the similar or the same action at the same time. And so parallel approaches are not good for scaling that out. And so that's why we purposely avoided taking a parallel approach and went for really looking at how do you improve sequential execution of the system rather than parallelizing it with multiple threads. That is a choice which I think makes sense for our use cases of where we're focused on. If you're looking at making, say, the next version of NASDAQ, where you have loads and loads of different pairs, then the parallel approaches I think are more interesting and better there. But for our use case type, we really thought through how you accelerate sequential execution first as opposed to parallel, because that's what the problem that we're trying to solve.
And how do you feel Somnia balances decentralization with performances? Because as you know very well, the more validators you have, the slower the blockchain is. And how do you achieve this performance?
Yeah, so we go for what I call sufficiently decentralized. So if you look at a Somnia node, it's similar to like a Solana, Sui, or Aptos node. So it's a decent powered machine that you need to run on top of Somnia. It is still consumer grade hardware. You could build it yourself. It probably cost you about $5,000 to $6,000. So you can get it from a consumer perspective, but ultimately you need a decent machine to run. And so when we're looking at Somnia, I think we're looking at getting to like the hundreds of nodes, not the thousands or tens of thousands like in Ethereum. So we're never going to target kind of running Somnia on top of like a Raspberry Pi so that anyone can run a node. We could do like partial nodes or, what people do to kind of boost their decentralization numbers. But really for full nodes, you will need to have a decent spec machine with very good internet connectivity and be part of that network. And so really when we're looking at Somnia, we're looking at getting to the hundreds of nodes rather than the thousands or tens of thousands of nodes, which we think is what we call sufficiently decentralized. So there is enough decentralization that you have multiple actors, that you have the security and the safety that you need for a distributed network, but not going to the level of like Ethereum. And that's where we're currently trying to land. So basically, if you look at Sui, if you look at Aptos, we'll probably end up the similar shape to those networks at the end of the day.
And how would you describe the Somnia tokenomics, the supply, the staking, and the fee burn?
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot here. So Somnia is the native token of the Somnia network. It has three major kind of utilities at a high level. So first of all, it is used as the gas token for the network. So whenever you want to use the network, you pay in the native Somnia token. That's its gas token. If you want to run a validator, you need to stake the token. So at the moment, you have to stake 5 million tokens to be a validator on the network. That basically entitles you to run compute for the network and get a portion of those gas fees. You can also, as a token holder, delegate your stake. So it's a DPoS system, delegated proof of stake, where essentially you as a token holder can delegate your tokens to validators. They will then share some of their rewards with you. The final element, which isn't really fully fleshed out yet, but we'll start to flesh out over the coming months, is it will have a governance role within the network. Now, we don't plan to do like your standard one token, one vote DAO. I don't think those models work very well, but I do think it's important that token holders have some say in the way the network is run and evolves over time, particularly on the financial aspects. But we're working out how that looks exactly. So going a click deeper, the Somnia gas model is quite different to other blockchains. First of all, so it's fully EVM compatible, so you have all the Ethereum gas model stuff. But the first thing is that the Somnia token is naturally deflationary. So what I mean by that is whenever you pay for gas on the Somnia network, 50% of that gas is burnt, so that reduces the supply, and then 50% goes to the validators to reward them for their services. That is different than other networks. Most other networks have an inflation rate of say 4, 6, 8, 12, seems some with 20%, and they use that essentially to pay for the validators continually. So the token supply is constantly growing. You'll see this with Solana if you ever look at Solana.
With those huge APRs, some of them.
Yeah, exactly. Those really juicy APRs, but what that means
That's the killer
basically,
project.
yeah, what that means is slowly but surely your token is becoming more and more worthless over time. And I don't think it's a sustainable or a very good model.
No, it's not. This is not.
It's designed for projects that want to get a token price up, lock up a load of supply, and then disappear probably. Anyway, so we take a different approach where there's no inflation for Somnia. There is actually deflation because naturally as the network gets used more, the tokens will get burnt and the supply will decrease. So I think this for me makes more sense because it incentivizes people to hold the token because it naturally will appreciate because of the supply dynamics. And then also incentivizes staking still because you can generate extra yield by delegating your staking to validators or being a validator on networks. So there's even more ways to generate rewards there. The way also the reward function works then is different to other networks in that it is in proportion to how much usage of the network there is. So the network isn't being used very much. There won't be an inflation which pays out the validators. So it's important to understand that there's kind of this scaling with usage value where you can earn a lot more in the Somnia network if it's getting used more, and you'll earn less if it's getting used less. And I think that makes sense, right? Because then it incentivizes all participants to grow the network and get more people to use the network, which will make it successful.
Work for your bags, basically.
Exactly. So in terms of supply, currently, so the total supply is 1 billion tokens. As I said, it has a deflationary metric. There are 160 million tokens unlocked at launch, so around 16% of the supply, which is relatively low, and that will kind of grow over time. The big cliff, like most projects, is at 12 months. That's when investors, team, and co start unlocking. But I think we should have enough time to kind of make sure the ecosystem is mature enough to absorb any new supply increase at that point in time. So yeah, that is an overview of the Somnia tokenomics.
Are you planning to do some kind of buybacks or something?
Very, very interesting question. So we are currently looking at Enshrined protocols. So this is a new thing in the space that I haven't heard many people talk about. But I think one of the problems with blockchain networks is they work well when there's not massive large supply pressures, but when there's large supply pressures due to unlocks and things like that, to get into issues because there's no direct revenue model. Like if you look at a DEX, for instance, it has a direct revenue model, it takes fees. You look at NFT marketplace, similar. So one of the things we're currently looking at, and this is quite new, this is literally, we decided to do this like a couple of weeks back, is enshrining certain protocols in the Somnia network, then accruing those revenues back to the Somnia token. So we're looking at DEXs, perp DEXs, clob DEXs, NFT marketplaces, and then also taking a percentage of the revenues of the games on top of Somnia and using all of those revenue streams to essentially buy back the token and then either redistribute it or burn it essentially at the end of the day. This is new. I've never seen a chain do this before. I think there's a trade-off.
Better chain's proof of liquidity.
Proof of liquidity does that. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
So
we're currently
also in Asia, Enshrined liquidity is somewhat similar, but at the end of the day, the issue that they had is that the protocols on top of them didn't generate revenue. So
I think for us, it's interesting because we're currently doing a lot of incentive programs. We have like a quest system, an incentive program that brings in a lot of users and a lot of usage of the protocols on top of the chain at the moment. And I've been looking at their revenues and I'm sitting there like, we're essentially emitting tokens to help these projects, but not getting that much in return. We're getting transaction fees, but it's not that much. And so we're really starting to think through how you enshrine protocols and systems into the network such that those revenues can accrue back to the token. And then what that means is you as a Somnia holder, you're not just buying into the network, you're also buying into the ecosystem as well. And you're placing a bet on the Somnia ecosystem growing over time. So yes, that is systems that we're currently literally looking at and probably be adding in the next couple of months. Which should increase the revenues of the system.
I think the biggest edge that you have different to the other ones that try to experiment with this is that you are actually targeting consumer apps. Yeah, the biggest issues for Berachain, for example, it was most of the apps that they deployed, nobody understood shit. So it's very hard for sophisticated DeFi systems. You have to be very experimented. They had their own jargon. So that's why it didn't work. But when you do consumer apps and you target internet users, Web 2 people, those people are going to bring you revenue. So that's the way you're going to see it in the Somnia token.
Yeah, exactly. I think we made a very conscious decision not to go down what I call the DeFi route, which is what most chains do. They basically build up a DeFi ecosystem, which there's like tweaks and modifications and stuff, but ultimately it's very similar to what else is out there. And when we first started Somnia, people were like, no, you should do that and compete in that arena. And I just see it as such a red ocean with so many other chains that are very well capitalized, have very strong protocols. You have to fight all of these people. And you can win temporarily as well with like big incentive schemes, pull in a load of users and TVL.
Yeah, but that's not long term.
Yeah, exactly. And then it all disappears as soon as the incentive schemes stop. And so for me, it was like, what is a fundamental revenue source that you can bring into the system that is sustainable? I think there are two. One are big institutions. If you have a pull that you can bring in massive institutional users, that's one. The other is mass consumers, so Web2 consumers, and bringing those on chain. Those are like two key revenue streams I think you can jam in. We're focused very much on the Web2 consumer angle. This is because of our background. We've been in the game industry for 14 years. We understand it very well. We're very well connected in the sports and music industry as well. So I think for us, we have an edge there. We don't really have an edge bringing in massive institutional clients. Although we are interestingly exploring that. As you launch a blockchain, these people kind of show up and are interested in doing things like RWAs, things like adding to lending protocols. We are exploring that, but it's not going to be our focus. Our focus is Web2 consumers, bring them on chain.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, RWAs could be also a consumer apps because, like Courtyard, that tokenize the Pokemon cards. That's the perfect example for an RWA with a consumer app. You could pay with your card. It's very simple. People don't really know what's happened in the back end. So that's where we are aiming as an industry. So I think we should aim at this.
Yeah, we have some interesting ones in that angle where there's one, for instance, where they're tokenizing sports teams. So they're buying equity and then putting that on chain. And that, again, is synergistic with the rest of our go-to-market because we have apps where they bring in famous football players. Then there's like, oh, do you want to buy into the team that's associated with them? Here you go. Here's an RWA system that you can do that. And so I think for me, when building an ecosystem, it's all about creating these synergies and these crossovers between the different apps in the ecosystem. And that creates more value for the whole at the end of the day.
If I'm just starting out into Somnia right now, where should I look at? What projects for the ecosystem I should look first? Where can I find like an ecosystem map? Where can I start my journey into this new world of Somnia?
Yep. So the best place is to go to browser.somnia.network. That's kind of like our front end to the network, where you can see all the apps, you can go to staking, you can bridge, all that kind of stuff. We're investing actually quite heavily into the browser, where basically we're going to build it into a mobile app that then can really appeal to a broad set of consumers and be very transparent with kind of wallet infrastructure. I think this is how you need to onboard Web2 consumers. You need to give them a very easy front door to the whole ecosystem. So go to browser.somnia.network, then you can see all the different apps. In terms of what I'd recommend, this is like picking favorites. This question is always a bit tough.
I know. If you don't want to answer, don't answer.
No, I always do answer.
You love all your kids.
Yeah, exactly. I always do answer because I feel like I have to answer. I can't just say, just check out. So if you're into gaming, it depends what kind of games you like. So if you like what I call hardcore games, my favorite one is Variance. So Variance is a roguelike. For people that don't know, roguelikes are games which are very tough, and you have to like fight through lots of dungeons. You die a lot, you respawn, you get better at the game continually, so you get that mastery loop. I personally am a massive fan of that. No, it's more like, I'm just trying to think about the most famous roguelike. I'm thinking about Hyperlight Drifter. No one will know that. I'm thinking like Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight, maybe people know that. I don't know if people know Hollow Knight. Anyway,
I'm not a gamer, so I'm not a target audience.
Yeah, so anyway, Dead Cells. Dead Cells is probably one of the most famous roguelikes. Anyway, so it's a roguelike. Highly recommend that if you're into hardcore games. It's also based in the web browser as well, so literally you can just click it and play. You don't have to do anything. If you're into Diablo, there's a game called Neveract Demons. That's basically like a Diablo clone with on-chain crafting mechanics. The interesting innovation they have there is you actually play as the demon, so you play as the bad guy rather than the good guy. But it's Diablo-like, very high-quality graphics built on top of Unreal. Need a decent PC to play that, but again, check that out if you're into that kind of game. If you want a more casual game, there's two I'd probably recommend. One is one called QR Seda. So that's a mobile title where essentially you go through dungeons, you get loot, you level up your character. Very simple, kind of like swipe left, swipe right mechanics. You can play that whilst you're on the couch watching TV. It's a very casual game, very easy to play. The other one I quite like that I've been playing a lot is Cafe Cosmos. Cafe Cosmos is a fully on-chain simulation game. It's kind of similar to, if people remember, Farmville from Facebook, those kind of games where you manage a little farm. But here you're managing a little cafe. What's cool about it is it's got play to earn mechanics. So essentially, by making your cafe more successful, you can earn Somni tokens. I've actually earned not much, like about 20 or so Somni tokens, but it's quite cool that I'm playing this game on my phone and then making some money at the end of the day. They've also got very sustainable tokenomics, where it's not just like people can extract loads of money and get all the money out of the system. They actually have quite sustainable tokenomics, which is cool to see.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask you, because in the history of Web3 gaming, games didn't really have success because the tokenomics were so bad. So all the incentives were into tokens, so it was always constant sell pressure on the token. So that means that means the project dies, that means it's game over.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense to me. I've seen it so many times. I know the reason. The reason is there's two reasons. One, you're first trying to appeal to investors. Investors want to see certain metrics. They want to see player numbers. They want to see retention numbers. And using digital assets like a token or NFTs is a good way to boost up those numbers so that you can then go to investors and raise a bunch of money. And then after that, once you've done your investor rounds, you now have exchanges. And exchanges also look at those similar metrics. And so the incentives in the ecosystem are around boosting your player numbers and retention metrics as high as possible, so you can get people to invest and you'll get exchanges to list you. But it's not sustainable. Like, all of these mechanisms are basically elaborate Ponzi schemes, essentially, and they don't work. So for me, there are a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, you can't mix free to play and play to earn. So you can't have people who can come into your game, never pay a cent, and make money from it. You'll create a leaky bucket, which you'll never win, and you'll continually have a mass load of bots, which will just suck out all the value from your ecosystem at the end of the day.
Especially now when you have professional farmers with 1,000 phones and
yeah, it's crazy. So you need to have what I call stakes. So people have to put money into the system to be able to then make money from the system. And then there needs to be some kind of time-based mechanism or skill-based mechanism, which basically means that people get paid out appropriately. And then some people will lose, just like a casino, right? You put money down, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. But you need to have those mechanics that you have money coming into the system as well as money coming out, and free-to-play doesn't work. One of the models that I'm interested in that I think people should exploit more, and don't know why they haven't, is adding in-game ads. So this is what you normally do in a free-to-play game on mobile. You have advertising, which is a massive kind of revenue driver for your game, and that's how actually a lot of free-to-play games accrue money through ads. So what I'd really like to see more is Web3 gaming take advantage of advertising as a way to generate revenues, then buy back the token, which creates a buy pressure loop. I don't know why more people don't do that. I think as well,
because most of them don't have real life experience. That's why they haven't been in the space in Web 2. They haven't. I don't know where they live.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's getting better, to be fair.
Yeah,
like if I remember the decks I saw like 4 or 5 years ago, 3-4 years ago, it was, so I'd get these pitches which all they talked about was the token and the NFT ecosystem. And I'd get to the end of like 20 minutes and be like, so what's the game and why is it fun? And they didn't really have a game. They just had like this elaborate token ecosystem. And I was like, okay. Like ultimately for me, you have to build a fun, retentive video game. That's the core. And then these Web3 mechanics and mechanisms you add on top to either juice up the engagement, increase the stakes and retention of the game in some form or fashion. But you have to have a good video game at your core. Otherwise, you're never going to win. And this is why if you look at the Somnia ecosystem, about 80% of the ecosystem is Web2 game developers that we brought into Web3, who are just strong game developers, and they built a fun,
because you already had
retentive
the
video
network.
game. Exactly. We already had the network, we already knew the people, but also just from a go-to-market perspective, that's how we decided to do it. I think a lot of the Web3 teams I meet, no offense to them, some of them are excellent, but a lot of them are just creating elaborate Ponzi schemes, basically, which will work for like a week or so and then completely explode. We do have some of those games in the ecosystem, don't get me wrong, because I know the Web3 native crowd likes them. I personally like them as well. I get onto these games.
Yeah, there is a niche for the digital audience, yeah, always.
Exactly, totally. I don't think you should shy away from that, but I think ultimately for Web3 gaming to be sustainable, you need to have these fun, retentive video games that have real revenue loops that can accrue back to some kind of token ecosystem, rather than what you see today, which is basically elaborate Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think back regarding what you said a bit earlier is that back in the day and until now, people were always talking about the tech, the token, the NFT, but nobody actually talked about what this product, what experience are you gonna have by using this product, what problem is actually gonna solve. And right now we're starting to see people coming to their minds and saying, bro, it's a game, you play it, it's enjoyable, it's, you know, because that's why not technical stuff and yada yada.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is the regulatory environment. So I think before there was just too much danger in touching Web3 and crypto. Like there's so many teams I used to meet I just didn't want to touch it because it was like, am I going to go to jail or get in trouble basically at the end of the day? And now you're seeing regulations soften. It's becoming much cleaner and clearer what you can and can't do. It's obviously not all being codified yet, but it's kind of becoming clearer. That I'm seeing now more professional Web2 teams getting more interested in Web3 again because they're like, actually, this is going to be okay. I'm not going to get in massive trouble in the future. So I think that helps a lot as well. I think as well, the big one that they haven't legislated yet, but I think is going to be positively legislated, are kind of buyback mechanisms. Before, doing buyback mechanisms was like, don't do that. That's like, you're going to get in massive trouble very quickly.
Yeah, because it was considered a security token, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't know why suddenly it's not considered a security token.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. We've got 3 years. That for sure. Then let's see what happens after 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I know you launched Dream Catalyst, basically backing developers with Web3 gaming, with grants and accelerator support.
Yeah. So Dream Catalyst was a program we launched with Uprising Labs. So Uprising Labs are kind of a Web3 gaming publisher, but they also have a Web2 arm as well. And really, what we were looking to do there was bring in high quality Web2 developers and bring them into Web3. That was really the primary drive of the Dream Catalyst. And you'll look, a lot of the teams inside Dream Catalyst, they're actually Web2 game devs first, and we brought them into Web3. And so the reason for this is game developers have kind of two major problems. One is capital to build out their game. So Dream Catalyst helps with that because we have a $10 million grant program where we're allocating capital to the games. And then the other one is a user base and consumer base. So we obviously have a strong community of gamers inside the Somnia ecosystem, which we can inject into games, and that's very valuable. But we're going to continue to grow that over the next few years because I think that as a value proposition for the ecosystem is going to be super important to onboarding more developers. This kind of large gaming orientated consumer crowd that we can just inject into all the games very quickly, I think is going to be incredibly valuable. So we're going to continue to invest in that and build in that, particularly doing Web2 go-to-market strategies to bring those consumers in. But yeah, Dream Catalyst has been very successful for us. We've just actually announced last week, I think, or the week before last, Dream Catalyst 2, as that's like the sequel to that. But this one, we're focused much more on mobile titles. I think for me, if I look at the Somnia ecosystem today, it's got a lot of high quality PC console titles, which are good for a certain demographic of gamer. But we want to broaden out to a more casual audience and a much bigger audience. And so mobile is where we're really like doubling down on this quarter to get more mobile developers. We have a couple of mobile games in the ecosystem today, a few web-based games. We want to kind of like triple down there because I think ultimately those are the highest probability games to get a lot of consumers interested in them very quickly. And that's what we're going for at the end of the day. The PC console games are much harder to get a large consumer base. You tend to go for a much smaller niche audience, get like 5 to 10,000 players and kind of lock those in. Whilst mobile, you tend to go to like millions of people. Although if you get a big PC console hit, you'll get to millions of people as well. But that's like Fortnite, Minecraft, those kind of crazy games. I don't know if we'll get there.
Yeah, also NFTs are a big part of the Somnia culture. Do you see them evolving beyond PFPs into gaming, metaverse assets, and real utility? I know Quills is, I think, is one of the top collections of Somnia.
Yeah. We didn't anticipate this. NFTs, we kind of didn't. So obviously Somnia is very kind of gaming and entertainment focused. And so it makes sense that the teams associated with that would create NFTs to do with their kind of games and experiences. In terms of their utility though, a lot of these assets you'll be able to actually use within the games or experiences within the Somnia network. So for instance, Quills, I don't know if they haven't spoken much about this, but they're actually building a video game, which is like a third person medieval fighter. And you'll be able to use your Quills within those games and use that character. We haven't spoken about this a lot because metaverse is sort of a taboo subject these days, but we actually created this interoperable object definition language called metaverse markup language, where you can essentially
and the Somnia playground, right?
Yeah, the playground is where you can use MML. And so that definition language allows you to create a definition of a 3D avatar in a way that can be used across all the different game engines and lots of different spaces. And so I think you will end up seeing Somnia as kind of like this interoperable ecosystem of experiences. You'll be able to take these kind of PFPs and use them within the experiences where it makes sense. Like, I think interoperability sounds cool, but I think makes sense a lot for cosmetic items and like your avatar, your wearables and things like that. But then actually affecting the gameplay, I think is a lot more risky. An example I always give is, imagine you bought an NFT that represented, I don't know, a gun, and you brought that into a game about wizards. It wouldn't make much sense, right? If you can shoot people in a wizard game, it wouldn't work anymore. So I think interoperability makes sense for kind of cosmetic items, but not necessarily for like functional items. And then you're going to see those then used within the entertainment experience as well. And I think our vision for like the long term of Somnia is it almost becomes like a decentralized version of Roblox. If you've ever seen Roblox and Web2, which is like this, there's lots of experiences. You can bring your avatar everywhere. You can play games. You can go to music concerts. There's loads of things you can do in Roblox. I think Somnia will end up something similar to that in its end format, which would be interesting to see.
So something is like a modular blockchain for entertainment.
Exactly. The blockchain for gaming and entertainment is our focus and kind of major place we're going. We are, though, starting to like there's a new vertical and set of apps that are kind of being created at the moment around prediction markets. So this one wasn't originally in our plan, but people basically are putting a lot of interesting data sources on the blockchain, and then using those to create fully on-chain prediction markets, which can resolve. So an example is there's a team putting all of the world's flight data. So they take flight data from an API, put that on chain, and then they're allowing people to make bets on the outcomes of that flight data. So they can say, I reckon this flight's going to be late. You put down a bet, and if it's late, they get paid out.
That's
an interesting
perfect
place.
for the degen culture.
Yeah, exactly. There's loads of these coming up, which I think are quite interesting, and they can do on Somnia because of its performance characteristics. And so we'll see what happens there. But that's also, I think, going to be another niche, which is prediction markets, which we'll see a lot more of as well on Somnia.
Do you have meme coins on Somnia?
We do indeed. There's quite a rich meme coin culture. I get in trouble because I mentioned some of the meme coins on these podcasts. And then they
don't do
spike
that. I wasn't sure if you have them, but
yeah,
kind
no,
of every chain has them. Even Plasma has meme coins. So
yeah, there's two meme coin launch pads. So there's Somnia.meme, and then you can go to Somnex.exchange. Those two both have meme coin launch pads. There's been a couple of runners. There's been a couple of projects which rugged and then became kind of community takeover projects, which the community have kind of helped keep going. I'm personally really enjoying watching the meme coin culture kind of spring up from Somnia. I think it comes back to like NFTs, memes, it all kind of fits together. People like to speculate and gamble as well, so it kind of makes sense. But I think it's quite interesting how it's almost creating like lore in the Somnia ecosystem. But yeah, that's we do have meme coins, and also because it's very quick to trade. Literally, I kind of forget about this because I've used Somnia so much as a user, and then I go back to another chain and I'm like, this is so much slower. It's like you forget how slow it is normally. For somebody just like click a button, it's like done.
We are living very interesting times, and I was talking this with Neil from Polygon. Basically, right now we see a lot of institutional adoption, but at the end of the day, we're still gonna have those trenchers, those degens, those people that are willing to bet on everything and make everything entertainment because it's in our blood.
I mean, it's I think it's part of the world now, right? People, it's sad, but there's such a divide between rich and poor, and people like want to make it, and they see all this stuff on like Instagram, TikTok, and they're like, I want that life, and the only way they can see how they get there. Exactly. And the only way I can get there is by putting down a big bet and hopefully getting paid out, which, I mean, it's crazy. When I go to so I watch a lot of football in the UK, so soccer. And whenever I go to the pub, people have put on these insane parlays of like 7 different things have to occur, and then they get paid out a ton if they occur. They never occur. It's literally like 1 in a million type things, but people still do it and people still believe they're going to make it kind of thing. I'm like, okay, cool. But yeah, it's cultural, right? This gambling has been in the culture since we were like cavemen, and now it's just like hyperfied because you can get so easy access to it with clicks of buttons.
Paul, one of the reasons that I started podcasting over a year ago is that I wanna learn myself and I wanna educate people as well. So I wanna know, because you are an actual businessman, you've run a business previously. You're not just starting out, you're not a kid, and I want to know, as a founder, how do you balance being visionary with being execution focused, especially in a market where hype cycles are brutal?
Very interesting question. I think for me, vision is a continual process which you evolve and explain to the market, going to these podcasts, talking on Twitter. You're continually pitching investors, you're continually refining your vision by being a CEO, an effective CEO. And if you're not, I don't know how you're hiring people, I don't know how you're raising funds, I don't know how you're doing anything basically. So for me, you're always doing that vision piece and projecting your vision out there, and you refine it as you do that as well, and it becomes sharper and sharper and sharper. In terms of the execution side, I think the key thing is about hiring excellent people. You cannot do it all yourself. It is impossible at any scale of business. And so hiring as an executive and a CEO is probably one of your most important functions, which I think a lot of people forget about. And a lot of people don't like. They don't like hiring. It's like, this is a waste of my time. I don't like to do this. And so what I would say is make sure you're spending a big chunk of your time hiring people and finding the best people you can, because that is ultimately how you're going to turn your vision into a reality at the speed you want to, because you'll always project into the future. That's what you do as a CEO. And you need those high quality execution partners to be able to work with you in order to actually make that vision a reality in any form or fashion.
And also
I think
the cultural fit, that's very important.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing as well, we really focus a lot on Somnia, are people that ship fast and are willing to break things. I think this is from my first ever startup I did. It was MMO technology, incredible piece of technology. Took us like nearly 2.5 years, 3 years to build and get to market. Took it to market, no one wanted it. Complete waste of money. Spent probably tens of millions of dollars building that thing and marketing it. No one wanted it at the end of the day. I learned a very important lesson that ideas don't matter at the end of the day. It's execution and being in the market. Getting to market as quickly as possible, learning and iterating is worth so much more than you sitting in your crystal castle thinking about how good your thing's going to be.
Yeah, I hate the people that said, yo, that was my idea. Yeah, bro, but where is the execution?
Doesn't matter.
It did nothing.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, doesn't matter. Like literally, ideas are 10 a penny. Execution is what matters. And why I give people my ideas all the time, because it doesn't matter. Execution is so much more important. But I don't think people understand that. People think all these startup founders just had a really good idea. I think they really underestimate how excellent they were at executing their go-to-market, their ability to build a team, their ability to turn that vision into a product. Yeah, completely underestimate that.
What keeps you motivated to keep building in Web 2, building in Web 3, building in Web 5, building in space, building?
It is, I want to help people as much as possible. At the end of the day, I think a good life is a life where you have helped as many people as you can before you die. And I ultimately do believe Web3 as a technology is like the ultimate leveler. It gives global access to a financial system, a system of digital assets, a compute platform, which anyone can use. And it becomes about much more egalitarian. So it doesn't matter who you are, you just need an excellent skill set and you can participate in this space and in using the technology. And I love that. Literally, if I look at our team, there are so many people from like places in the world which you would never naturally go to hire, but because Web3 is this open kind of melting pot of people, they all have an opportunity to contribute, become part of the ecosystem, join the community, and then ultimately make money and do good for themselves. And so for me, what drives me at the end of the day and why I get out of bed and why I do anything in technology is that I ultimately think it is a leveler that helps the world become better and more egalitarian. And that's why I think Web3 for me is the most optimal version of that at the moment. Yeah, that's why I do what I do.
In all your journey, did you have like any mentors or people that helped you shape the pole that is today?
Yeah, ultimately, I have like I call them the council. So whenever I think about new ideas, I constantly meet these people probably like once or twice a month, and I talk about new ideas, about problems I'm having in the business. Ultimately, you can't do everything by yourself. You have to have those people who have seen things before that can give you that feedback. So those people are more senior and seasoned, I'd say, and they've been around for a long time. I also make sure I have kind of a consortium of peers who are also doing similar things to me that I kind of talk through. And they're incredibly invaluable because they're like going through the hard things that you're going through, and they can really resonate with you and they help you go through tough times. They also help you in good times as well. And so for me, the way I did that is quite interesting. I literally so for peers I've just met throughout my career, networked and found. But for mentors, I actually reached out to hundreds of people early on in my career. And I was like, hey, these were people that I was like, this person has got where I kind of want to go to. And I would just message them through LinkedIn or find their email. And eventually some people would respond, and then I'd create a relationship with them and keep them in my kind of council. And that's changed over time as well as I've shifted my career. But I think the key thing I would say to people is just reach out. People always want to pay it back. Like if they've been successful, they want to help new entrepreneurs and new people. And if you message them, you'd be very surprised how many people will say yes. I wouldn't go after someone who's like crazy up there as well. Make sure they're like 2 or 3 steps ahead of you rather than like 20 steps ahead of you.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do on Twitter right now. Because
yeah, exactly.
Twitter is basically the LinkedIn of crypto.
Yep.
How do institutions view crypto today versus 2-3 years ago? Because we are clearly entering in a new chapter. Do you think like the biggest blocker was regulation, maturity? Is it perception?
It was regulation. I think now you're seeing it right on the timeline. You just see people like Stripe, see people like Google. They're now all starting to enter the space where before they wouldn't touch it because regulatory clarity. It was so dangerous to take a risk as a large institutional player and becoming part of the space and the scene. Now you're getting that regulatory clarity and you're seeing people step into the arena, and you'll continue to see that. I think for me, going behind the scenes a bit, we've spoken to like large brands for the past 5 years, 7 years now. In 2020, 2021, when it was massively hyped up, all these brands wanted to press play. They were like, we need a Web3 strategy. This is the new internet, blah, 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 blah. And because it was massively hyped, people just wanted to do something. Then had the bear market, everyone disappeared. Everyone was really terrified because there's loads of scams, loads of problems, loads of issues. And now I'm seeing people come back to the table, but there's a difference. Before they were trying to capture a hype cycle and just make something. Now they're actually trying to build businesses, and they're thinking about how can this modify our existing business models, or how can this create new moats and new ways of going to market that we didn't have before.
They are thinking about revenue, not about how can I pump this
exactly.
token.
Exactly. It's not about hype anymore. It's now about revenue streams and business lines, which again shows the maturity and shows people are more interested in thinking about the space long term rather than just like, let's create some NFTs or tokens and disappear. So yeah, for me, I think this is why I don't know how people can't be mega bullish on the space. It's just really weird. Obviously, the timeline fluctuates with like where Bitcoin is at any point in time, where the market is. But like,
do you see the whole 4-year cycle is gonna be disruptive? Is it gonna be like a hyper cycle because we are entering a new stage and projects are more mature, or are we gonna see like before when it's gonna be like a ghost town? And then how do you see it?
Yeah, I don't think so. There will still be the cyclical nature because it's ups and downs with financial markets at the end of the day. 4-year cycle, 5-year cycle, I don't know. It's roughly something that looks like that. But I don't think this cycle's down will be anything like the last ones where you have complete ghost town and like everything like stops basically, because it's basically like risen each time. And now I think you will have enough institutional adoption, enough baseline where it won't just disappear. It will become quieter, don't get me wrong, but it will kind of keep going and the baseline will kind of increase significantly. This is from 2 factors. One, there's so much more institutional adoption now of the asset class that I just don't think you're going to see like minus 70% Bitcoin. If you do, there's going to be some problems. And then the other thing as well is you now have larger players coming in who have long-term views like ourselves, like lots of other people. And so people will keep building and keep those go-to-market motions on. And it won't just be all around the cycle of the hype cycle of tokens. So yeah, I hope that is the case. And I think that'll be the case.
Where do you feel you are in the cycle right now?
I think we are quite late. I think we have probably 6 months left, 6 to 9 months left.
Oh, that's a lot though.
Yeah.
6 months. 6 months out.
Yeah, 6 to 9 months I think is probably where I place. I originally I was going to say at the end of this year, but it feels like it's getting.
To be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think at the end of this year, but it feels a little bit more protracted than previous cycles, and so I actually think it will go into Q1 and maybe even Q2. But let's see. I think ultimately, watch the macro, see what happens. I think there is still room to run in terms of global liquidity, central bank easing. We haven't got to that point yet of like absolute craziness. We've had little sparks of it, but I don't think it's actually happened yet. So
and
I think
Trump's not tweeting stupid ideas on Twitter.
Oh man, I'm gonna miss him when he's gone though. He's very entertaining. It makes him much more entertaining.
Yeah, I should have asked you this question a little bit earlier when you said it's very important to actually reach out to people. How important is personal brand today to make it in crypto?
Oh, it's one of the most important things in my view. I made this mistake. I only really started building my personal brand at the start of this year. And if I go back in time, my biggest kind of thing, I'd say do that from the beginning. I think ultimately crypto has massive trust issues. There's been so many scams and so many problems. And you being the face of your business, you being out there building up that kind of trust with the community and the broader crypto community is incredibly important these days, and probably the most important thing you can do as a CEO. And if you don't feel like you can do it as a CEO because you're like hyper introverted, find someone that can do it for you, because I think it's essential. People don't connect with brands anymore. They connect with people. You're seeing this even in Web2, right? It's all influencer market these days. And so you need to have a person at the front of your business, and that's the person that everyone connects to and then trusts you at the end of the day, because trust is one of the most important commodities in Web3 in my view. So yeah, super, super important in my view. Yep.
Before you wrap this up, Paul, thank you again for your time, but you're a busy guy. For builders joining Somnia or just joining the crypto rabbit hole, what's your advice for them?
Whoa, for builders just joining the crypto rabbit hole, what I would say is there's a few things. I think my biggest one is be very, very careful not to get swept by the hype cycles. It is really tempting to just chase what is shiny and new and be like, I'm going to chase this thing. But crypto, if you haven't been in it for a long time, these things are so fast, and you probably won't get to market fast enough that hype cycle will already died by the time you decide to do it. So you have to go to where you're strong or where you think it's going to go next. Because if you try and go where it currently is today, it will move by the time you get there. So that's, I'd probably say, one of my biggest pieces of advice. And it's really hard not to do that, because you get brainwashed by crypto Twitter. You get brainwashed when you go to any of the conferences and people are all talking about the next hot thing. But it changes literally every 2 to 3 months. And so I just wouldn't worry about it. Execute, focus on your go-to-market, build your consumer base, build up real revenue streams, and that doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Paul, brother, that's a wrap. Thanks a bunch for your time today.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. It's been fun. See you later, guys.
Have a great one.